Good afternoon, guys. It's afternoon here. Good morning, good evening, good middle of the night if you're up late, wherever you are and whatever time it is. So, this bike has been here. This 74 Sportster Ironhead has been here a week and 2 days. I got it completely stripped, got the frame cut in half, and got the hardtail on. It fought me a little bit more than I thought. The biggest thing was the weight of this engine. This is the first Ironhead, which is an all cast iron V-twin. For those of you that might not know, that's how it got the name Ironhead. But I was not used to the weight of this compared to the all aluminum Evo Sportster engines that I'm used to moving around. And so it wasn't a case of just grabbing the old engine and pulling it out of there. I found that out real quick. I did learn an old trick. I happen to have an old trailer tire laying around from a job I did a couple of years ago. And I took the tire and put it on the ground on its side, and I put some blankets, some old moving blankets in the center. And these engines only come out on the left-hand side of the bike. So you essentially just wheel the bike up next to the tire, lay it over on its left-hand side with that. I had to put some blocks on the one side to support the jugs, and then that the transmission will sit right in the dip of that tire, and the jugs will sit on. I just put some 2x4s on there to space up off the edge of the tire, and it'll lay right in there. And the tires of the bike will come off the ground. So essentially all the weight of the engine is on that tire. And then you can unbolt the frame from the engine, and it helps to have somebody help you. One person on the back, one person on the front of the bike, and just lift the bike up off of there. Even with all that, these things fit so tight in the frame that you kind of got to gently wiggle and jiggle it on there to get it to come off. I think there is a little bit more clearance now because there's no longer a big old swing arm pivot point in the back that the end of the transmission case has to clear to come separate from the frame. So that caught me a little off guard. I dealt with it, got it out, and then I had to contact Voodoo Vintage for the instructions on where to chop the factory frame and install the new one. This is a customer bike, so the whole complete bike was dropped off with the subframe that he had ordered, and I had nothing to go by. I will say on Voodoo Vintage's part, this was ordered through Lowbrow, but Voodoo Vintage makes it. And I will say that I contacted them on a Sunday, and the guy got a hold of me within an hour. And I thanked him, very graciously on getting back to me so soon, because that's the nature of what I do a lot of times is, yes, time is money, but it's one of those deals where that it's like, I don't want to have to wait till Monday to work on this, because then I start working on something else that day, and then that's got to be moved out of place back on Monday and all this kind of stuff. So he was really cool about getting back to me right away, and he even joked, he was like, no worries, man, Sundays are for choppers. So I was very thankful for that. And anyhow, everything fit up fine once I got those instructions. There is one measurement that they gave me on where to cut the backbone that I'm not too pleased with, that measurement on where it's pulled from, and I'll get into why that is. So let's go ahead and just get into it. So this is much improved over factory lines. I know there's the other type of person out there that's a non-chopper person that would be like, why would you ever take suspension off a motorcycle? Well, there's those of us that this is what we like. And choppers are basically the equivalent of the hot rod of the bicycle or bike world, motorcycle world. So the more stripped down, the better. And I got to thinking about it too because there's so many of these I looked at since I started this build for him, just to get ideas and reference on a lot of different parts and lines. And it's like I was telling him that there's really not much difference in all of them because a chopper is really the essence of a motorcycle once you get rid of everything else. And a motorcycle, what it does for a person riding it, and it's such a visceral experience, and it moves a person, moves a person's soul if you want to go that far. That to me, it's like if you just strip it down to the essence of a motorcycle and improve on that, then you can't go wrong. I guess you could put hardtailing in that category of stripping it down. And I think that's kind of where the whole chopper scene even shot itself in the foot in the early 2000s and going into the 2000s is when the whole theme bike thing started. And fat rear wheels and tires were cool in the beginning when they were like up to maybe 240, 250 wide. Then once they started going to like 300, 330 and all, it's always that whole mentality of more and more and more and more is better. And but with the theme bike stuff, it reminded me of like the hot rod scene in the 60s and 70s when Ed Roth came around and hot rods were all the rage. And the same thing, it was just the stripped down essence of a muscle car or a drag strip car for the street. Then, they started becoming animated. And when Ed Roth came around, then the next thing you know, they were making hot rods out of phone booths and toilet bowls and all kinds of stuff to where it just got cheesy. And the same thing happened with the bikes in the 2000s. And the chopper scene basically suicided itself. Then the whole bagger thing started. And that's just how the bike stuff goes. I mean, it's just in and out with trends. So anyhow, like I was saying with the measurements. So I don't remember what the exact measurement was that they gave me, but the measurement on where to cut the stock backbone, they told me to reference off of that casting hole right there. And the problem with that is with all factory cast parts or factory anything, which is one reason I don't like factory, is you can see this hole on this side is darn near centered on that boss. If you come around to the other side, and I knew this was going to happen, that same hole here is, if you look at the casting boss, it's darn near an 1/8 inch to the rear of the face of that. And standing directly over the bike, if you were able to see it on the camera, you can actually see it in there like this. So that being said, I pulled the same measurement from this side. I used that side because it's the one they used in their instructions. But I pulled this measurement and marked it. I pulled it on the same side and marked it. I put a piece of masking tape around the tube to get a true line around there. And sure enough, when I measured, it was an 1/8 inch off. So if it were me making decisions like this, I would much rather pull that dimension off of this casting line where the tube actually goes into this whole stock cast piece, because that's actually a true line around the diameter or circumference of the tube. It's gonna put you an 1/8 inch off. I went by this side, which is what they told me, and I still wound up with about a 1/4 inch gap here, which was fine because it's got that there's a big internal steel slug in here, solid steel slug. So I wanted a gap anyway so I could weld solid to that and then have the tube ends weld to that and then fill the whole thing. Plus I drilled this and put a rosette weld in there, or I'm still used to calling it a plug weld. That's what I always have heard it called in the fab industry. And the bottom two tubes are the same way. There's that piece that comes on here from their factory. It's got a machine slug, and they both go in there, and you drill a hole on both the tops of both tubes for a rosette weld, plug weld, and that's that. And then I had to get this big old beast back in here because there's two ways you can do this. When you take the engine out of the stock frame, before you cut this, you can actually just make, in hindsight, I wish I would have done this, you could just make a jig or a fixture off of the stock rear motor mount plate and then your front location and pull that out and then cut the frame. Then when you put this new subframe on, you can just bolt your jig back into the front mounts and bolt the transmission plate to that and have your jig located for you. And the main thing with that is it's obviously a lot easier and lighter to move a tiny hand fixture in and out than moving the whole engine in and out. But I wanted to do it this way because I wanted to see, with the whole engine and transmission in there, bolted solid to the front and then also locked into the top, I wanted to see where that was going to put the end of the transmission on that seat post tube. I just don't trust it with the hand fixture, and I don't trust it putting that in there and you're bolted here and then just having that coming back to hold that engine plate and position it. I like to see the whole thing in there and see all of my clearances, and the clearances on this are so ridiculously tight. That bolt in there, I mean, there's like a 16th between that bolt on this rocker cover and the bottom of that tube. And then the tube also had to be flattened on the bottom side. And the reason for that being, this factory piece that I had taken off, you can see where it's also flattened on the bottom. And the instructions that Voodoo Vintage had sent me said that some years would be like this, and for the solid steel slug that goes in here, you would actually have to grind a bit off the bottom of it to fit in here, which I did. But anyhow, that new rear subframe, that tube is perfectly round. And obviously it meets the factory tube that's flattened on the bottom, and it's flattened specifically to clear this rear cylinder rocker cover. And I did at first tack the subframe in without doing anything to it. And sure enough, I tried to put the engine in and it would not fit. It will fit when it's in there, but it won't come in and out of the frame without clearancing that. So I had to clearance it and get everything blended in. So obviously it looks like, one piece. I know it's going to be covered with the tank and all that other stuff, but I just like clean fab work. It's probably one of my biggest pet peeves. And there it is. I did the whole thing of, they suggested just getting the center point of your rear axle plates and running a string all the way up to the head tube as a reference to to see where it's straight. You can do that, or you can use like a carpenter's laser too from any Lowe's, Home Depot, wherever. And you can set those on the floor and push a button and it'll shoot a laser straight up there, a red laser line. And I've done that a lot in the past with frames too. So it's much improved. I got to figure out now the rear axle situation, because if we reuse this stock drum to keep in this time period, this era, the new subframe came with 3/4 inch axle plates for a 3/4 inch axle, and the stocker is like, it's some weird metric standard proprietary deal, It's not even 5/8. It's like 11/16. So the issue with it too is the axle itself is, the shaft is like 11/16, but on the heads of these, there's a little flat spot in there that stays in your dropout slot to keep the axle from spinning. And on the factory one, that space for that slot is actually a hair over 7/8, and it's 3/4 on there. So the axle itself is smaller, but the slot to go in the dropout is larger. So I could enlarge those dropout slots to accommodate the 7/8. The only issue is even if I do that, this new hardtail actually wound up being like, I think it's like a 1/4 inch wider than the stock swing arm. So the axle's too short, at least to get enough good thread engagement for the nut. So I got to figure that out. And if I do use this, Voodoo Vintage did include this tab, this frame tab, and that actually goes on the inside of the axle plate for the drum brake to keep, as a stop to keep it from spinning on the axle. So I've got to figure that out, because the other option is we just get rid of this whole wheel and tire and put in a more modern one with a traditional disc on the left and sprocket on the right. And this was also right-hand shift, left-hand brake. So I got that to engineer, which I'm actually not even too concerned about that, because I have that figured out either way. It's mostly this axle situation that I got to get sorted out. Axle, rear wheel, brake situation. And I went ahead and pulled the front fender. I'm thinking we're going to reuse this front end. I don't know if he's going to want to get the lower legs shaved and cleaned up of the fender mounts and stuff. And then, of course, all of this up here has got to go. Obviously, a different set of bars, but something that's more period correct. This stuff is way too modern looking for what this bike is going to be. So all that's got to get changed. Headlight, that factory little hood on there, all that's got to go. So again, it keeps coming back to the same thing, is you're just stripping the motorcycle down to the essentials of what the machine is. I was actually just watching an old Indian Larry video the other day too, and he was talking about the same thing. I mean, he even disliked sheet metal on the bike. He called it an unnecessary evil. And he was, if you look at a lot of his bikes, it was down to that just gas tank, rear fender, oil tank, and that was it. The rest of it was all motor, all mechanical. He would have twin disc in the front. Like, he was all about the performance and just taking it down to the bare bones of the motorcycle, which again, it's like a motorcycle is such a unique machine. It's kind of like trying to reinvent the wheel. And I think if you can take it down to its bare essence and just improve upon that and make that as best as it can be, I don't see how you can go wrong with it. And then the other thing is, it's timeless. People that they're into choppers today because that's what's in, or they're into baggers today because that's what's in. And then it's like 10 years or less from now, people are laughing about them. Like, even like the whole theme bike thing, like, who cares about a theme bike now? In fact, there's people making videos about how stupid they think they are and how people wasted $80,000 or $100,000 on them, but that's how it goes. So anyhow, I'll keep you guys updated.